All right, let's head to the other two teams that are still in the Champions League. Bayern Munich at Stuttgart on Friday, a rare Friday appearance for Bayern Munich, getting some extra time ahead of the Leverkusen game. We have to maybe later address whether Bayern playing on the Friday and Leverkusen playing on the Saturday evening is going to impact this Champions League fixture between those two. Um, Having said that, and of course you can see if you disagree with me on that one. I think that maybe Bayern had to work a little bit harder for their result than Leverkusen had to work for theirs. Um, I actually was a little bit disheartened on how Stuttgart lost this game, and I have to really emphasize they lost this game. They really just gave it away. Played played some really good football as they often do. Stiller took the lead in the 34th minute, and Olise with the equalizer in the 45th. Then it was really balanced until the 64th minute when Nubel gave the ball away to Goretzka. He makes it 2-1, right? And then Stuttgart kind of looked a little devoid of ideas from there on out. And then Coman scores after a Wagnermann mistake. He plays it back too short to Nubel, and it's 3-1, game over. Bayern get the 3 points that we pretty much expected they would get. But Stuttgart really had a run for it. And I think when you VfB Stuttgart, you look at this game and you look at this game as a nutshell, it's kind of like how this entire season went for them. They're obviously still very good. It's still a very talented team. A few key pieces were taken away from them. New players have come in. They are learning on the job. And so it's just maybe a good 10 to 20% less than they were last year. And that is just enough to produce results like that and drop from, a top 4 or top 2 spot to where they are now in the ninth in the table, still within a shout to reach the Champions League. They are still in that pack. There is a very condensed pack of teams that sitting in a 6 point, 6 point average, like 6 point difference between each other. So they're still in that, but this is the sort of game where you look at it and you're like, yeah, they probably would have won this game last year. They wouldn't have made those individual mistakes. They would have been a bit sharper. They would have probably been a bit fresher. The Champions League football is also playing a role here. And they maybe would have won this game last year. And just this year, they made those couple of mistakes. Bayern Munich are just a little bit sharper than they were last year. And here we are. And that's unfortunate, I think, for neutrals that were watching this game. But, I think it's also a really big lesson for Sebastian Hoeneß going forward when he goes into the next season and tries to maybe get the club back to where they were last year. But, Bayern Munich march on, Stefan. This was the two fixtures where we said they could drop points there. They beat Frankfurt 4-1. They beat Stuttgart 3-1. The 8 point gap remains to Leverkusen. The title is within reach or pretty much close to being wrapped up. And the only question I have really is, and we're going to talk about this in great length maybe when we're done the Leverkusen segment, but it might all not matter if they don't beat Leverkusen in the Champions League. And so it's kind of funny how the focus around this entire game is really about what's to come with the Bundesliga title already wrapped up.
Yeah, it was an interesting game for Bayern because I completely agree with you. I thought Stuttgart actually played quite well. They could have went ahead within a couple of minutes when Davies just lets that through ball, that long ball go over the top. I think it was Wagnermann who got at the end of it with a kind of tame shot. Stiller obviously then scores an incredible goal. And, up until half time, Stuttgart actually were looking quite good. Obviously, Olise scored before half time. And then, as you said, individual mistakes kind of cause problems. It's as they would say in tennis, like an unforced error from Stuttgart. And yeah, it was the shortcomings in this squad, which, as you said, has unfortunately kind of really held them back this season, despite some great performances. And they have put in some great performances in big games. Obviously, that Real Madrid game comes to mind. But Bayern were just so clinical, and interestingly enough, once again, clinical without, Harry Kane really kind of being the guy who sticks the ball in the back of the net. Olise scores, Goretzka scores, Kingsley Coman scores an incredible goal from, after poor Alexander Nobel was kind of left high and dry, like basically on the halfway line. But I just kind of really wanted to focus on that Michael Olise performance for a minute, because that goal he scores just before half time, was just so well taken, and it was just a superb shot. It's worth looking up the highlights for, because he just played through by Leroy Sane. It's great pass from Sane, great assist. A bit of a kind of stramash in the middle of the pitch, and then Sane gets onto this loose ball and just quickly plays Michael Olise through, and he just looks up and curls it into the back of the net. And like that little moment there, I think I was watching it and I was thinking, that feels to me like the one thing that really differentiates Olise from Bayern's other forward players this season. If you speak to Bayern fans, they'll tell you, Kingsley Coman, Serge Gnabry, Leroy Sané, all these guys have their strengths, but they all have one obvious weakness, is that none of them seem to be particularly clinical in front of goal. They can all take shots, they can all go by a guy, they can all create goals for their team, but none of them really have that ability to make sure they're finishing every single chance. I'm not saying that Sané couldn't hit that shot. I'm not saying that any of them couldn't hit that shot that Olise hit. But it just feels to me like this year, Olise's came into this Bayern Munich team and he's brought a kind of clinical touch in front of goal, which has really differentiated him from those other three players. And sure enough, I was quickly checking the stats before we came on. He's now sitting on 0.87 goals and assists per 90 minutes, which is excluding penalties. Which is better than Sané, Coman, Serge Gnabry. It's even better than Jamal Musiala, which I thought was quite interesting. But the other stat that I thought was really, really interesting, which is really worth kind of noting, was that kind of take a look at how many shots these guys are taking per game and how many they're getting on target. The amount of shots they're hitting per game is about the same. The amount of shots they hit on target is about the same. For example, Michael Olise is hitting about 1.46 shots on target per game. Gnabry's 1.63, Coman's 1.3, Leroy Sané's 1.2. So there's a wee bit of a difference, but not a huge difference. The big difference is their shot accuracy. How many times these guys got a shot on target? Leroy Sané is averaging 35% for shots on target. Kingsley Coman's averaging 39. Serge Gnabry's averaging 40. Michael Olise is averaging 47.2, so a 7% jump, which is actually better than Harry Kane this season. It's better than Jamal Musiala this season. It's more or less identical to Thomas Muller's this season, and as a result, him and Muller actually are the most clinical in terms of getting the shots on target in that Bayern Munich team this year. And I think that's just quite telling that he's obviously got 8 goals in the Bundesliga. I think, if I'm not mistaken, he's third only to Harry Kane and Jamal Musiala for goals this season. And I just think he's been such a breath of fresh air when you think about that, if you compare that to the kind of frustration that Bayern fans have had on that left wing all season long, whether it be Gnabry, Coman, Leroy Sané. Michael Olise is just slotted into that right wing position seamlessly. And it's the guy, by the way, who's only 1 year older than Jamal Musiala. We're not talking about some 27 or 28-year-old who's, a well-seasoned pro. We're talking about a young player with bags of potential, and he's just arrived at Bayern and he's like, yeah, that's absolutely fine. I'm absolutely fine being the match winner for this team when I have to be, because he's so clinical in front of goals. So, I don't know, I just felt like that was worth noting because that goal was beautiful, and he just seems to do it time and time again where these other guys struggle with it.
It's also interesting to see Leroy Sané with an amazing pass, right, to set that up. He's been better in recent weeks, like a lot better, and you wonder if some of it is due to the fact that Bayern Munich are dangling that carrot of a contract in front of his nose. They kind of just like sitting there and, you wanna stay? We can give you a contract, but it's going to be a lot less money, and it's going to be performance based. And I think there isn't that a ton of other interest around for him as well. And I think he really wants to stay. So I think they kind of said to him, well, if you want to stay, show us. And I think this was actually a performance where I thought he played really well. The fact that he drifted to a number 10 role and found that space and played that pass, he just seems more engaged, more industrious, and I think he's a player playing for his contract, and it's showing, Stefan.
Yeah, much like Davies was in the first half of the season. No, I completely agree with you. I think Sané's looked much better in recent weeks. Maybe it's just a case of finally getting back to full fitness. He finally looks like a player who's 100%. He's kind of got that mad sharpness back. And when he's on form, he's tremendous. As you said, he can score goals, he can create goals. I think Sané, when he's fit, is a better player than Serge Gnabry and Kingsley Coman. I think when he's fit, he's a potentially world-class player, to be perfectly honest with you. The problem is that not just in terms of the injuries he gets, but he also takes a long time to recover from injuries, I think. I think that's the other thing. He has a long recovery process where he starts playing games, but he's obviously not 100%. And he's just one of those flair players that if he's 85%, 90%, he's still not the player that he usually is. And yeah, I thought he was a difference maker in this game as well. And I'd be really interested to see what they do going into that Leverkusen game, which we'll obviously talk about in a minute. But yeah, I thought Bayern did relatively well here. I mean, there's a few players where maybe, that defense freaked a lot, I think. I think Dennis Undav, if he was in better form, maybe scores a goal or two in that game. And I thought Bayern were kind of pulled around the pitch for quite a lot. Obviously missing Kimmich, obviously missing Upamecano. So there's a lot that Bayern were kind of having to contend with in that match. But at the end of the day, it's a really important 3 points. And we did kind of highlight that this is one of the games that they could have struggled in alongside the Frankfurt one, and they've came out with flying colours.
Yeah, no, I think this was the homework they had to get done. If they want to secure the title, these were the potential stumbling blocks. It gets a lot easier for Bayern Munich from now on, right? Bochum or Union Berlin are the next two. And then it's St. Pauli. All due respect, but I don't see any obstacles. Then it's Augsburg, and then you're already match day 29, right? Where you have Dortmund. Dortmund reduce it maybe to 5 points there. Do we really think 5 points in 5 match days?
You are completely overlooking that important Bavarian derby, which form goes out the window.
I mentioned Augsburg.
Yeah, about saying, when form goes out the window when derbies come along, and that Augsburg Bayern derby goes back. It's as old as time. One of the fiercest ones in Germany. So anything could happen that day.
Yeah, I am old enough to remember when FC Augsburg were BC Augsburg. So there's that. No, Augsburg. I mean, in all honesty, Augsburg is where Bundesliga titles go to die. Ask Dortmund.
Yeah. Right. And they have been playing well. I mean, we obviously record this before the Freiburg game, but they've been playing really well recently. If I'm not mistaken, no, I was going to say they recently did all right, but then I think it's the Kiel game I'm thinking of where the Bayern actually there was a game where they actually quite lucky, even though they won 3-0. But yeah. I mean, they're not losing the title. No one expects them to. We certainly don't. So yeah, it's all just training for the Champions League at this point.
Yeah, we have a lot of anxiety-driven Bayern fans in the Substack that still believe the title isn't wrapped up, and so if you honestly, if Bayern throw away the Bundesliga title against Bochum, Union Berlin, St. Pauli, and Augsburg.
But we also have a few Bayern fans that basically riot whenever Stanisic doesn't play. So I mean, it's maybe not the best. It's maybe not the best place to kind of check the kind of general temperature of most Bayern Munich fans.
He's the new Matis Tell.